Hi, and welcome back to your puppy blueprint, where you can stop guessing, wondering, and Googling how to have a well-behaved puppy and discover how to turn the chaos to calm. I'm your host, Kelly Fahey, and today I'm joined by Pam Brown. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about our guest today. Pamela is a professional certified dog trainer, and she lives in Norwood, Massachusetts. She specializes in helping busy families start their puppies on the right track to being the best versions of themselves. She's diligent about achieving goals and resolving negative behavior patterns in dogs, adept at assessing root causes of behavior problems, stresses, and social anxieties in dogs, both in and out of the home. She's a graduate of the Catch Academy, and she achieved her dog trainer certification through there. Pam also went on to further her education to better understand and assess her knowledge of dogs and achieved her professional certification from the nationally recognized Council for Certification for Professional Dog Trainers, obtaining her CPDT knowledge assessed. I'm always a tongue twister with that one.
Tongue tied.
And Pam is always committed to helping dog owners find the solutions they're looking for to create a calm home environment. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of puppy socialization, early socialization. This is one of
Yes.
my favorite topics. Welcome, Pam.
Favorite.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I love this topic. This is such
Yeah.
a passionate topic of mine. So I can't wait to chat with you about it because, oh my gosh,
Yes.
we could talk about this forever, but we're going to try to keep it short for everybody.
Exactly. Absolutely. So socialization. So for those who don't know what socialization is, let's just start there so we all can be on the same page.
Yes.
So socialization is introducing your puppies to different places, people, animals, obstacles, and sounds in a positive way, in a responsible manner as well, so they can grow into an adult with the ability to adapt to new experiences. So essentially what I'm saying is, if you have those dogs that you see that are barking, lunging, or dogs that may be a little bit reactive or fearful, they probably are not, they weren't socialized earlier on when they were puppies. So that's why we want to make sure that, you start the process of early socialization, introducing them to these things so that when they go out into the world, when they're adults, they're not as scared anymore. And so a lot of times when we talk about socialization, can be misconceptions, as you probably would know, with, I'm going to take my dog to the dog park and things like that. But I want to talk to you about bringing it back to the beginning, actually what it means, how to go about doing it, and when to start it. So, dog owners will actually know of how to go about doing it.
Yeah, it's a really
Yeah.
important topic, and how to do it is really important because, a Google search, Facebook group,
Hmm.
books, basically anywhere a puppy parent tries to find this information, they're going to find a lot of conflicting information. And it can be
Absolutely.
really hard, not to mention frustrating, to decipher what is and isn't accurate out there.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much misinformation, and everybody is well
Hmm.
intended, and they find this information and then they think they're doing right by their puppy, but there's
Exactly.
just there's just so much wrong
Hmm.
information out there. So we want to set it all straight for everybody today.
Exactly. And so just to start off, when we talk about socialization in puppies, so the most important time of a dog's life is like the first 8 weeks. And during that time, they're like sponges and they take in all this information. But if you think about it, at 8 weeks, either we're just getting our dog at 8 weeks, or a lot of times we're not getting them till 12 weeks or later. But during that time, they take in things like a sponge. So depending on what type of environment they're in, or with the breeder or the shelter or the homeowner did with the dog prior to you getting the dog, is going to make a difference. So that's why when I come into the client's home or talking to families, I always want to know the dog's history, because that can give me a good insight into their current behavior, especially when we're talking about socialization. So ideally, during that 8 week time, 8 to 12 weeks, we would like for the person who had them to take them out, to get all these experiences with different people, places, and things. So again, they're not fearful in the future. So if you do have a dog that's between 8 and 12 weeks, we're talking about socialization. But once a dog is older than that, we're really talking about behavior modification, which is a little bit different. But in this segment, we're talking about the socialization piece.
Right.
So just keeping in mind, we're talking about puppies in between the ages of 8 and 12 weeks old, that we want to socialize them so they're not fearful. You
Yeah,
know?
because this is their sensitive period, and this is where
Sensitive is
yeah,
absolutely.
this is where they're learning what's good and safe, what's scary and
Yes.
bad, because they're
Hmm.
curious about everything and they're checking it all out. And so this is that really critical time for them.
Yeah.
Once they hit that, you know, 12-week period, they kind of go
Mhm.
from, "Ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's this?" to, "What's that?
Yeah.
What's that?" You know, they're a
Yeah,
little bit
there's
more
like a little
cautious.
fear thing going on, fear
Mhm.
period, yeah, going on where they kind of get a little fearful of things. So that's why it's important to start as early as possible. But then, you get the question of, well, my dog's not vaccinated. What do I do? And this time, with everything going on now, the vets are booked out months. You may not be able to get an appointment as close as you want them to in order to socialize your dog. Because ideally, when you do take your dog out into public, you want them to have all their vaccinations first so they're not getting sick. So if you get a dog, like say at like 10 weeks or 12 weeks, but you don't get a vet appointment until they're like 16 weeks, that could be like a real problem. So I always encourage, um, when you're talking about socialization, there's always a ton of other things that you can do, like going for a ride with your dog in a car, sitting out on your front porch. But just to backtrack a little bit, we want to talk about, of course, the body language and what that actually looks like. Because there's no point in taking your dog out different places if you don't know what makes them feel good about being out, what's going to scare them, and what's not.
Yeah, because socialization isn't just about dragging our dogs and checking
No,
off a list of things that we're
you want
doing.
to make sure
Like,
they
oh,
love it. Yes.
yeah, yeah, like, oh, we saw a man with a beard today, or we saw a lady in
Hmm.
a wheelchair, or we saw a cow. It's not
Exactly.
about just ticking things off the list. It's about positively introducing our puppies to these things so we can teach
Absolutely.
them that these things are good and safe. We don't want them to have scary or bad experiences.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah,
And
and
so
so mhm.
one of the biggest myths too is like, oh, okay, well, I'll just take my dog to the dog park. We got dogs, we got people, but again, it's more than that. So I always encourage families, take a look at your daily life, take a look at your whole year, because take a look and try to, simulate like, okay, who do I see all the time? What places do I go all the time? And you want to start there. But again, let's talk about the dog's body language. You want to make sure they're enjoying it. So if you're going out into the world and say your dog is, hesitant to walk in a certain direction, or if their ears go flat to the head, or if they just seem kind of like they're, not feeling comfortable, those are all signs that your dog doesn't, like the environment, like the person, place, or thing. But again, we always try to use food to get the dog to learn to enjoy, to love things. Most dogs do love food, not every dog. So when you go out with you in the world to help them build this positive association, to help them learn to love things, you want to just start feeding them treats. Like Kelly was saying, if you see the bearded man, give him his treat. If you see a kid, give him a treat. Every time they look to something and you see a dog looking like, what is that? Give them a treat. So they're like, wow, every time I see a bearded man, I get, a lovely treat and I love this. And then next time they see a bearded man, they learn to love that. So that's, kind of general idea what socialization is all about, making sure that your dog love all these experiences, you
Yeah,
know?
and linking positive things to that is really important because it's
Yep.
not just about giving the dogs treats, because sometimes people will
No.
say, well, what does that have to do with it? But it's not just giving them treats. Like, food is information for your dog as well.
Yes.
So,
Hmm.
well, there's a scary man with a beard, but every time I see a scary man with a beard, a piece of cheese happens. Hey, I love seeing men with beards, or whatever it is. This is how we start linking that positive association. And of course, we could do it through play as well.
Yes.
Because anytime a puppy meets a new person, and that person is goofing around with them and having a good time with them, the puppy is learning,
Yes.
through that facilitation of play, that hey, people
Mhm.
are pretty cool. So that's really important that we're linking those positive associations. And I love what you said about just sitting out on the porch or going for a car ride, because it's
Mhm.
not about meeting every dog, it's not about meeting every person.
Nope.
It's simply letting your puppy also observe the environment. They don't have to go up to the kids on the playground
Nope.
to learn that kids are safe, because simply watching from a distance of
Mhm.
all the kids running and playing and going on the slides, they're taking that information in and checking it out, hearing the sounds, the sights, all of that.
Absolutely.
That is all socialization. Just looking, learning, and observing
Mhm.
the environment is part of learning. Like, when
Yep.
we go places, you hear people all the time that talk, they like to sit and watch and do people watching. Like, you learn
Yes.
so much by watching.
Mhm.
And our
Mhm.
puppies can do the same thing. We don't have to meet every dog. We shouldn't meet every dog for a bunch of reasons. And
Nope.
we don't need to run up to every person again for a bunch of different reasons. Um, to socialize our puppies. I mean,
Yeah,
simply going through the bank drive-through is a great socialization
absolutely. The food
opportunity.
drive-through. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you take my puppy through the bank drive-through. Oh, he loves it. He sits up,
Yep.
he looks, he waits. He knows his fan club is gonna be sending him a cookie
Yeah.
coming
Or the
back to you.
puppuccinos. I'm a big fan of those. Going through the drive-through for the puppuccinos. Those are always good too.
Yeah, and those are great examples of linking positive associations because
Hmm.
here we have this thing like going to the bank or going to the coffee place, and so big deal, right? But then
Hmm.
all of a sudden a cookie or a puppuccino appears through the window. Dog's like, hey, that's pretty
Yep.
cool. You go
Yep.
again, all of a sudden they perk up. They're like, I love when we go to McDonald's because we get French fries.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is linking a positive association. The dog has
Yep.
good feelings, and we want that to happen not just with their food bowl or their food puzzle toy or the cookie jar at home.
Hmm.
We want this to happen with people, places, things, sights, sounds, all that stuff that you mentioned earlier on.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to bring up about socialization, because if you're in a area like me, like New England, where it gets cold, and say most people, not most, but a lot of people do get dogs around the holidays because that's just a popular time to get dogs. But when we're talking to socialization, getting them used to people, places, and things, it's wintertime. You have to think about it. There's going to be less people out. So if you get a dog in the wintertime, socialization is going to be a little bit different than doing it in the spring when there's like a plethora of people out, other dogs and stuff. So I always tell families to keep that in mind if you're getting a dog in the wintertime, that, around spring, start to kind of ramp up on this, taking your dog out a little bit more if they even between that time, if they're within that socialization period, even if they're not, just try to take them out a little bit more before summer hits and everyone's out. Because during wintertime, you just not getting the same effect with socialization, with the having as many people out and dogs out and things like that. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind if you are getting a dog, the time of year you're going to get it. And not saying you can't get one in the winter or stuff, but just being more mindful of what it's going to probably take, to socialize your dog even more.
Yeah, and there's lots of places people can go indoors as well. I love
Sure.
I am not a do-it-yourselfer kind of girl. I mean, changing batteries and light bulbs is the extent of my home improvement skills. But when I have a puppy, we
Yep.
love going to Home Depot and Lowe's because they
Yes.
welcome well-mannered dogs on leash. And so
Hmm.
it's really a great place to go because there's so many different areas that you can go and see people pushing
Yeah.
carts, people with strollers. So there's definitely
Hmm.
lots of places that we can go. And a lot of people
Absolutely.
don't know that they can take their puppies to these places. I know I get clients
Yes.
all the time who say, you could take your dog to Lowe's. You can, as long as they're
Absolutely.
well
Home
mannered and
Depot.
leashed.
Exactly. And
You can go.
Marshalls is another one. You could take your dog that a lot of people don't know. So if
Mhm.
you just Google like where places to take my dog near me or the store that you're thinking about going to, they definitely will have a policy on Google that you'll see whether you can or can't take the dogs.
Right.
But just to piggyback up what you're saying about taking your dogs to Home Depot, um, when I talk to families about socialization, everyone's excited to get all that information, but you do want to be careful about the first place you take your puppy. So one of my packages is a socialization package where I strategically take puppies to different areas each week. But with Home Depot, that's usually one of the last places I take them within the package because it can be overwhelming for a
Yeah.
little puppy. And if you think about it, we're up high. These puppies are down low, and then maneuvering through Home Depot can be a lot. So if you are going to take your dog off, start with a low key place. I love starting on like state parks or trails or things like that
Mhm.
where they're allowed to sniff, get some of that energy out. And then once they're used to that, maybe I'll take them to like a town common. I love, love, love taking my puppy to my daughter's games. So if you have kids and they have practices, I love doing that too. So just be mindful not to take your dog to a place that may be too overwhelming for them first. Start off with something low key and then gradually get to a place where it may be a little bit more distracting for them.
Yeah. And every puppy's different too, because there are
Yes,
some puppies who are a little bit more
advance, and they
reserved
can go
and
to Home Depot first.
yeah, they're a little bit more reserved and shy. And then there's some
Mhm.
who are a little bit more spunkier and outgoing. And, just like people, we've got introverts and we've got extroverts. And
Yep.
so and knowing your puppy is really important to where
Hmm.
to go. And, for those listening about places like Lowe's and Home Depot, if you do go, you
Hmm.
don't have to go to the garden center in the springtime when it's the
I
busiest.
stand right outside.
Yeah, you could go in and go to the plumbing department that's not very busy, or lumber,
Yes.
because there's hardly anybody in lumber. Um,
Or the
and
fridge department's my favorite.
yeah, so, you can find spots within these locations, work with your puppy there a little bit, have a good
Mhm.
experience, and leave. You don't have to do the whole place like it's Disney World. You could just
Yep.
go, let it serve a small purpose, and then move on to something else that you're gonna do. So, yeah, you don't have to stay there
Mhm.
for a long time because, again, we want the puppy to enjoy it.
Yep. And another thing too about socialization, I'll work with families, and puppies around 4 months. If you don't know, they hit like this fear period where you think, oh, puppies, 8 to whatever weeks, they're like fun and loving, and then all of a sudden, I get to a client's home or family's house, and they're like, oh my god, my puppy won't walk anywhere. They don't want to go anywhere. And I always encourage families, just give your puppy a minute to take in stuff. So if you're walking with your dog, socializing them, or if you're taking them somewhere and they do this like move where they're like pulling back or whatever, sometimes just sitting there and letting them take in what they're seeing or what they spotted or whatever it is that they're looking at for just a few seconds, and then like, okay, let's go. Usually they're okay. So just be mindful. Don't force them into any situations. Give them a second. Just like, it's almost like going to New York City, how everyone's looking up like that. And then imagine if someone's like, come on, Kelly, come on, come on. You're not going to look. But they just give you a second to take it in. You'd probably be a little bit more better. So just remember with your dog, just give them a minute.
Yeah, and that's something that, sometimes we'll see a lot, like, as trainers when we go out, we kind of see a lot of stuff going on with people and their
Hmm.
dogs when we observe it. We do often see people like trying to force their puppy to go see whatever it is that they're unsure of.
Yep.
If you just sit back and you wait, this is like a really good time for you to observe too, like,
Mhm.
okay, my puppy was really concerned about this, whatever it is.
Yes.
And
Make note.
yeah, take a note and maybe you work
Hmm.
on that later. Maybe it's the storm drain in your neighborhood because those are scary, right? There are these metal
Yep.
grates. They might make sound if it's raining. It could be a variety of things. Instead of saying, "Oh, you're silly. Let's go look at it."
Exactly.
let's
Yeah.
let's let the puppy observe, see what's going on. We start linking it, as we were talking about earlier, with positive
Hmm.
associations. They might feel encouraged to take a step or two forward. It doesn't mean that they're going to want to go see whatever it is in that moment, but they might feel good enough to move forward. And that's where you take those notes and you say, you know what, the storm drains or
Yep.
the fire hydrant or whatever it is, my puppy
Hmm.
was not too keen on. I'm going to make a note of that and I'm going to work on that because, as you mentioned, at that 16 weeks of age, they do start looking at things a little bit differently because,
Yeah.
survival. like,
Yeah.
and,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
so we want to
Hmm.
help them through that, and help
Hmm.
shift that for them.
Yep. And another thing that would be helpful too when it comes down to socialization, we're talking about dogs not wanting to go places. A lot of times we get our dogs like, okay, I'm taking a dog for a walk. But when I take my dog for a walk, when I work with dogs, I almost have it in my head as though the dog's taking me for a walk. Let them lead the walk sometimes. And what that means is like when you start to walk off, follow them. Let them kind of guide the walk. Belongs in not obviously walking in the street or being a nuisance and stuff like that. Honestly, I would let the dog guide the walk and let them kind of explore. And, it almost works out better that way when they feel like they're kind of getting a chance to explore, do their thing. And you're not like pressuring them, like, okay, let's go this route, let's go that route. And they love you forever for that. And that helps socialization too. But it also helps you take notes like, okay, my dog's interested in this. Like you said, they're fearful of this instead of you just going the same route or doing whatever. So I encourage you, let your dog kind of guide the walk and they'll love you forever for that too. And they'll help you learn as well.
Yeah, because they're just out there exploring everything and checking it out and
Yep.
whatnot. And yeah, I do. I love that when you go somewhere and you come to this point and you might want to go left, but the dog is sniffing and wants to go right. So we go right. It's not a big
Exactly.
deal.
No big deal. No
Yeah.
big deal. And make sure you have enough time too, because I know everyone's busy these days and you have the short route and you go, you may have the long route, but just try to make enough time so your dog, especially at this age, can really take time and take in the world as you're walking them. That's all.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It's a really important time for puppies. This is where they're learning about the world, and this is when
Hmm.
they're puppies, but this is going to help develop those confident canines when they're adults.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I know we're talking about early socialization, but if you happen to have a dog that's a little bit older, is at that point it's more about changing the dog's behavior, but we still can use treats to help them have a positive experience. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm watching this. There's no hope for me. You can still use treats if you know your dog's a little bit fearful of things and use that to pair it to make it a positive association. So it's not the end of the world. It's just that it's a different approach. That's we can talk about another day. But when it comes down to early socialization, definitely using the treats. We'll fade it out later. If you're worried about your dog becoming, too treat dependent, we do fade that out. But that's all part of, helping them love the world, so that
Yeah,
they love it in the future.
absolutely, absolutely.
Hmm.
So, what are some of the biggest let's talk about what some of the biggest misconceptions are with regards to early
Yep.
socialization.
The one I discussed prior, I'm going to take my dog to a dog park. That's sufficient enough. Not saying it's not. That's a piece of it. Of course, they're going to be socialized to love dogs and love the dog park. But as we just talked about, it's more than just that. You have to take them to, see. So when we're talking about people, let me just break it down. So, for instance, I had a client who's like, oh, my dog loves my friend, but my friend came in a house and now my dog doesn't like my friend. And so I always ask, what's changed? And she's like, well, my friend has these red glasses now, or my friend changed my hair color. Something as little as that can kind of throw a dog off. But if your dog's seen a bunch of people with red glasses on when they was a puppy or had that introduction to glasses, it may have not been so shocking, when the dog experienced that with the friend. So keeping that in mind, we want it to be, just keep in mind, like people with hats on, people with glasses on, tall people, short people, kid, different surfaces is a big thing too. You don't want to get to the beach, and find out that your dog doesn't like the beach or concrete and things like that. So one of the biggest misconceptions is like, okay, we'll just go to the dog park. It'll be great. Or, I'll take my dog to group classes to socialize them. That'll be sufficient enough. So not saying group classes isn't enough, but you need to do more. So if you are, or if you are going to go to group classes, look at your dog's body language, see if they're fearful of things, see what they love, what they don't love. So turn it into a socialization experience, not just like, okay, I'm just going to take my dog to a class. So I think that, the biggest misconception is like taking a dog to the dog park and also, doing the group classes. Those are the two big ones that I hear.
Yeah, and
Have
you
you
know,
heard of any ones or you?
yeah, I was actually going to touch base a little bit on, what you
Mhm,
said earlier about, the exposure to like men and women and tall men and short
mhm.
men. Our puppies notice all the little differences. Like when you were talking about the red glasses,
Yep.
um, we see people and we look at them as people as a whole, but our puppies notice, and obviously we have men, women, and children,
Yeah.
but our puppies see tall men, man with facial hair, man with no facial hair, woman with umbrella, woman with
Mhm.
glasses. Babies are different than toddlers, are different than young kids, are different than teenagers. These are all
Mhm.
very specific to our dogs. And this is why we see, going back to early, talk about early socialization, where a dog who's older, we might get those phone calls where my the kids are now school age, little
Yep.
Timmy's trying to have some friends over and the dog is not doing well. And I don't
Yes.
understand it because he was always great with my kids. But
Mhm.
if Fido has only ever had exposure to little Timmy and Sally, this is what he knows about children.
Mhm.
Doesn't know anything else about children. And so he needs to see more children to know that children are safe, because at this point he only knows that these two kids are safe. And so all
Yep.
those new kids are scary that are now coming in. So our dogs notice these little differences in everything. And it's not just about seeing kids and saying, well, my like again, it's not
Yep.
just a checklist. My
Mhm.
dog saw
Mhm.
little kids today. It's about repeated exposures as well. So they can say, oh yeah, kids, not so bad.
Yep.
And introducing new things, but also repeated exposures. We see
Mhm.
lots of different things where all of a sudden somebody's got a broken leg and now they're on crutches.
Yes.
The dog is like,
That's happened.
what is that? That's
Mhm.
not what people look like to me. And
Yep.
so all the all of these great exposures and these positive associations that we're making, and the more we open up the world to our puppies, when they do see
Mhm.
things like that later on in life, those odd things like the broken leg and the cast
Mhm.
and the crutches or what have you, they're not as bothered by it because they're like, you know what? I've seen a lot in my day, and you're not going to trip me up with that. So this is why getting our puppies out and exposing them in a positive way
Mhm.
to so many things is so important.
Yep. And so also to piggyback off of what I was saying before about the times of year, and like you said, you can go indoors and stuff like that. So what I talk to my families about too is, for instance, like I always use my daughter playing sports. There's a certain time of year she does lacrosse, right? In the wintertime, she's not doing lacrosse. If I were to get a puppy right now in December and then take her to like say the lacrosse field in like April, she may be like too overwhelmed by that. So what I do is part of socialization in December, I take her to like a lacrosse field in December. So she's like, I remember this from there. So part of what I'm saying is like, of course you can go into stores, we'll do that, but just make sure you taking them to the locations too, so they'll have those positive experiences, especially if you're not going to be there for months from then.
Right, right. Let's talk a
Mhm.
little bit about how puppy parents can get started with early socialization, because this can feel like a really big task.
Mhm.
I know I get phone calls all the time, like they want to make sure they do it right, or they had a dog before and they know they didn't do it right the first time. They don't want to make the same mistakes the second time, so they're really looking for help. How
Okay.
can they get started off on this?
So when I talk to families, the first thing I sit down with them and do is like, let's write down the places that you go on a regular basis. I'm a big fan of, of course, we can take extra time to go out our way and socialize dogs, but you want to make it part of whatever you're naturally doing, just so you're not taking any extra time out your day. So I always recommend write down all the places that you go on a normal daily basis, or for that week, or for that year, or just the whatever it may be, write that all down, okay? And then what you want to do is you want to, of course, start with a place, like I said, that's not as distracting. So suppose you write down, okay, we go on a trail walk, we go pick up my kids from school, and then we go, grocery shopping, okay? Suppose, saying the dog can go in the store. You would start off with like this place that is not going to be so distracting as first, which is going to be most likely the trail walk, given, your dog is kind of, low key or whatever. So you start off with a place that's least distracting. You want to bring treats along. Make sure your dog loves the treats that you're bringing so that they can kind of focus on you as well. And when you start to go out to those places, try to go to the same place a few times. That's what I recommend, so they can get used to it. So go to that place a few times, but also you want to really be looking at your dog and see their body language and how they're reacting to the environment, people, and things. But again, like Kelly said, be mindful of, when your dog is looking at things, looking at the person, whether they're short, tall, making sure you're hitting those points, seeing kids, seeing adults, people with different things. So starting with a low key place and then watching your dog's body language. The most common signs you'll see is like sometimes your dog will stop and pause and stiffen up. Their ears may go flat back to the head. There's so many other signals that your dog may give you that they may be a little bit scared or shy or fearful, but there's also those signs they give you that they really love what they see and stuff. And so what you want to do, if you see that your dog is maybe shy, fearful, or whatever it may be towards what they're looking at or the environment they're in, you use treats and you feed them treats to build that a positive association. So everywhere you go, you're just going to bring treats and feed your dog treats, whether you're tossing it on the floor, whether you go into a park, sitting on a bench and just feeding them treats as people pass by, or when you see them looking at something, you can feed them a treat just to start to build up that positive association. And so you just want to take it one place at a time. Don't feel too overwhelmed by this. There's no, you know, I guess there's no way to truly kind of mess this up. I'd say belong to getting your dog out there, but you just want to make sure you're kind of seeing different things.
Yeah,
And you can
just
kind
be
of piggyback
mindful.
off that too, if you kind of,
Yeah, you just want to be mindful of where you're going.
mindful.
And like I said, or like you said, I love how you said, make sure you go back to the trail, because it's not just about ticking off that list and saying, well, we went to a trail today, or
Yep.
we went here today. It's repeated exposures as well, because you might go on the trail today and your puppy's going to have
Hmm.
one experience, and then you go on the trail next week and it's going to be a different experience depending on out
Exactly.
there.
Time
So
of day matters. Hmm.
yeah. And so those repeated exposures are important because it is going to be a little bit different each time they go. And so we still want to get out to other places, but we want to also make sure that we're continuing to go to some of the same places as well, and everything.
Yep,
It's not just about ticking off
absolutely.
boxes on a list and
Mhm,
everything.
mhm. Yep.
So are there any big hurdles with socialization?
Again, the biggest hurdle is the immunizations. I would say that's the biggest one. I feel like a lot of families are on board once they get the whole socialization piece and want to take their dog out. But then I'll hear, wait, but my dog doesn't have an appointment for the vaccinations until, whatever it may be. And so they always feel like that's a roadblock. But again, you can take your dogs, in the car, sit in a parking lot, feed them treats. I do that with my dog. Did that with my puppy last year because she was born on Christmas all the time. Like took her, even when we went to the vet, everyone was had to sit outside. They probably still do. And it's, while we're waiting for the vet, as cars pass by, giving her treats, sitting out on your front porch, at busier times of day. Instead of during, when I did that a lot when my daughter's getting off the school bus, sitting out front with my puppy as the kids walk by, or in the morning where parents are driving by with their kids. So there's definitely different ways you can get over that hurdle if your dog doesn't have their vaccination yet.
Right. And, and a really good important point to that is we still can take our puppies out even though they're not fully vaccinated,
Yeah,
because
it's just about where.
it's where. And, AVSAB, who is the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior, they've got a position statement on this, which is really important. They talk
Yep.
about making sure that we get our puppies out for socialization, even if they don't have all their vaccines, because the risk of behavior fallout later is much
Yes.
higher than the risk of puppies getting sick.
Mhm.
That is much lower, but not doing proper socialization, the behavior fallout later is a greater risk. And again, we
Yeah.
just need to be mindful.
Exactly. Like you don't want to take your dog to a dog park if they're not, vaccinated. That's probably not the best idea, but going like maybe on a trail or sitting at a park, that's probably fine, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, and
So there are places.
I've taken many of puppies, when they weren't fully vaccinated places. Sometimes I'll just put them in the shopping cart with a blanket down so
Exactly.
their little paws don't get caught in the grates,
Hmm.
and it's great because it also serves another purpose where a lot of people just aren't coming up to my puppy and overwhelming my puppy because they're in my cart. And
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
I've got a little bit more control of the situation as well. And so if we're afraid that something could happen, there's definitely ways that we can do that. Even if somebody's afraid to go to the park, because where I live, it's not very populated. It's pretty rural, but there are
Okay.
a lot more populated areas. But you can still go to the park, carry your
Mhm.
puppy if you're concerned,
Absolutely.
sit on a blanket with your puppy, and then we're do just what we talked about earlier. Let your puppy observe everything. So
Hmm.
we just want to make sure that your puppy's world, when they don't have their shots, isn't so tiny that when they finally do get out in the world, it's overwhelming and scary because they only know the loop around the block because they haven't been
Yep.
anywhere because they didn't have their shots. Now imagine this is all I know for how many weeks. And now all of a sudden the puppy can go all these places and that world widens up so much. It is going to
Hmm.
be scary for them because they don't know anything outside of that block. So getting them out is really, really important and just doing it mindfully. So excellent.
Absolutely.
Well, this was great.
It was.
Pam has a free gift for everybody. Pam, can you tell us what you're going to give to our audience
Yes.
today?
So, if you're getting a new puppy or you have a new puppy, I'm going to give to you a free puppy guide to jumpstart you in your life with your family and your puppy. So there's some things in there that's going to get you started, like a puppy shopping list, how to start house training and things like that. So you can get the guide, use that as a starting point for when you get your puppy and just continue from there.
Awesome. That's great. And everybody who's listening can get that by clicking the link below this video. That will get you access to that awesome guide. Thanks so much for sharing that with everybody, Pam. That's awesome.
Welcome.
So
Thank
this
you.
is a huge topic. I mean, I could talk about this
No,
for hours, and we can go to a lot more
no.
detail. There's so many things we could have drilled down
Yes.
and
Hmm.
specific, their own specific topics. Do you have any last minute advice for our audience before we go?
Just do it.
Just
Just do
do it.
it.
Yeah,
Just
just do it.
like Kelly said, don't wait for the vaccinations. Although it's ideal, but the risk later. Just start now. Even if after you're watching this, you're like, I don't know. Just start somewhere.
Yeah,
Start, and you'll be
absolutely.
thankful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, those little trips, they don't seem like much, but they really are
Yeah.
important and
Yeah.
everything. Well, I want to thank Pam for joining us today
Thank
and
you.
talking about this really important topic. It's a passion of mine. This topic is really is a high
Mhm,
priority for me. I also
mhm.
want to thank everyone listening. I'm really glad that you were able to join us so we could clear up some of the incorrect and conflicting information that's floating around the internet on socialization. I know how frustrating it can be. Don't forget to grab your free gift from Pam below in the link, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Bye
All
bye,
right, bye.
everyone.